Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Thursday, March 13th, 2025, episode 334, and we're going to talk about how all crime is hate crime. Uh, I recorded an episode with Pen Jams earlier today, and it'll be up on his site, and he's going to share the file with me, and I'll upload it on this channel as well. And then I'll spend a little time interviewing him sometime in the near future. But anyway, this morning I was listening to Mario Maneko 64, or Mario Eneko is his name. He's based out in England, and he was a former bond trader for like 20 years. And so he has some really good takes on what's going on in the financial markets. So I listen to him every day, and this morning he mentioned in passing this idea of artificial riches. So he was reading from a book that was written in the 14th century, but the lessons from it are still legit today. So he was talking about, and it reminded me very much of, uh, Austrian regression theory when it came to understanding where money came from. And so he was reading a selection out of the first chapter, and he said that money was developed to exchange natural riches uh, between people. So people wanted to trade their commodities, the things that they had produced, things that they had made, with other people, but it became more convenient to simply use money. So the commodity, the actual natural riches, that's the stuff that has value, and money is what is used to exchange with other people, right? So that way you don't have to deal with trying to find a person at the right time who has the very thing that you need, which is the problem that you encounter with barter, right? Sometimes you don't need another apple. You need, you need a plumber instead. So money makes it easier to manage all those transactions. But money itself, in his take, is artificial riches, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing, right? So we always, in the Austrian school, people always say that money is a commodity, but this person's subjective take was that money is simply artificial riches. And the reason why he says that it's artificial is because you can't eat that money, right? So a man can die of hunger. And he referenced the fable of a king who was so greedy that he prayed to the gods that everything he touches would turn to gold. And the gods granted him that wish. And of course, he starved to death because you can't eat gold. Right. And so artificial riches do not satisfy the needs of life. It's just simply something that was invented for the exchange of natural riches. And so it's just simply to facilitate trade. It's not it's not that they are actually real. And so I thought it was very similar to I thought a biblical understanding of temporary, right? Artificial. It's not really real. And it kind of gave me a little bit of a better sense of how scripture might have thought about money. So it conjures also images of being on a desert island with tons of gold, right? Gold by itself doesn't really satisfy anything. Like if you have no one else from which you can buy anything, then gold is pretty much useless. And I thought about Bitcoin as well. People don't want the Bitcoin, they want what you can get with the Bitcoin. And so people imagine how much they can get with the Bitcoin, but it itself is not what people desire. And that's a Peter Schiff argument. Anyway, so that was just a little aside introduction to what I wanted to talk about today, which is all crime is hate crime. I forget, I was listening to something this morning. I can't remember exactly what it was, and I just jotted down pretty quickly, all crime is hate crime. So I forget what the inspiration of it was. It just came to me, and I just decided to write it down and do something with it. So I tapped out some, the process of working out the logic, and it was so convoluted that I'll just give you the conclusion first. Crime is just crime, okay? So the argument I'm going to make is maybe how some people would get to the point where they'll say that certain crimes are just crimes and other crimes are hate crimes. But it's not really a big deal when you look at the grand scheme of things that all crime is a hate crime because it's just crime, right? So a hate crime is crime, crime is crime, so all crime is crime. But if you say, no, that's a hate crime, well, then everything is a hate crime. All right, so that's the conclusion. So here's how I work it out. So hate, what's hate? Dislike, intensely, detest something, extreme hostility or aversion. But you got to ask yourself, what is detestable, right? Or depending on what is detestable or not is subjective, right? So it depends on the person. People hate different things. So we might be able to say that hate crime is to commit a crime based on the way that you feel about someone or something. So the next question we got to ask is, what's crime? So something injurious to the public welfare, this is dictionary.com, public welfare or morals or to the interests of the state. So something injurious to the public welfare or morals or to the interests of the state. And since I'm an anarcho-capitalist, we don't care about the state, right? Because hating the government should not be a crime, especially when they have monopoly justice and monopoly force, right? So hating the government should be just simply a way of life. All right, so forgetting about that. So something injurious to the public welfare or morals, okay? So if we boil it down, it's just simply an issue of property. And property is huge, right? It includes the property of the person's body, the person's labor. So you can't damage it and you can't steal it. You can't threaten it with violence either, right? And that threat of violence too, it all depends, right? So, uh, right, I might say, "Ooh, I'm going to kill you," but obviously I'm not going to kill you. But if I'm holding a gun to your face, then maybe I'm being serious, right? So I think, uh, keeping that in mind, that it's not any threat of violence, but a serious threat of violence, right? And I believe in what do you call it? Second Amendment situations, right? When are you allowed to draw your weapon, right? So if you think that your life is under threat, and that's where a sticky point, right? That's where you'll either get in a lot of trouble for drawing a weapon or not, right? So that threat of violence. So it's very, very depends on where you are, what's happening, et cetera, et cetera. So if we just focus on the property, the damage of property and the theft of property, well, we're just talking about damage like theft or vandalism, murder, right? So if we're talking about damage of property based on emotions, well, you can hate someone, but if you don't do anything, then there's no crime, right? So just simply having negative emotions about someone by itself is not a crime. And that's something that a lot of people seem to forget, especially these days when First Amendment rights are being violated. Okay, so we got that. So you hate someone so much that you damage their property or you steal their property. So we got to look at the go back to the idea of emotion, right, or hate. I've said before, particularly on my Sunday sermons, that emotion is basically the lack of knowledge, right? Because you have it in emotion, there is just feeling, right? And so it's a lack of knowledge. You don't know really for sure, but you have a feeling, right? And then on the opposite side of the scale is no emotion, all logic, pure logic, right? You're a Vulcan, if I were to make a Star Trek reference there. So there's no emotion, it's just all rational logic. And so you won't be letting your emotions, right, how you feel, interfere with your judgment or the decision that you're going to make. Now, just because you say you use your logic doesn't mean that your logic won't be flawed, but nevertheless, you're trying to keep your emotions out of it. So, how does one know one's feelings, right? So, is it love? Is it hate? What is love? I mean, people might even say, I did it for love, right? So, can you do something, even something illegal, and it be okay because you did it for love? Well, hate is the opposite of love. And so love is good, it's beautiful. And so, therefore, what is beautiful is justice, which means that what is unjust is ugly, that's hate, right? So we know love is love because love must be just. And this is what I mean. It was getting kind of convoluted. So basically, in summary, what we've got is crime is something that, is a damage to your property, right? And property includes your body, your labor, right? Theft of your property. Okay, so that's the crime. So what's hate crime? Well, now we're talking about emotions that were present when you committed this crime, right? But emotion, if you think about it, it's all about lack of knowledge. So how do you know you're acting purely on emotion or if you are acting logically? Well, it comes down to what is just, right? What is justice? And so actions which are in line with justice, that's love. Actions which are not in line with justice, that's hate. And so any crime is going to be a hate crime because it is unjust, right? All crime is a violation of property rights, and so therefore it's unjust. So therefore all crimes are hate crimes simply because they are unjust. And so to designate some things as hate crimes is just simply redundant, right? People use the expression hate crime to justify stiffer sentences, stiffer penalties, harsher penalties on someone who has committed the crime. But when you get down to it, vandalism is vandalism. Murder is murder. I used to have this discussion all the time in my race class, especially when there was some race-related crime on the news. And there's always some kind of race-related crime on the news. It wasn't just at the beginning of the lockdowns, with George Floyd and things of that nature. And so someone would in class would say, "Oh, a black man was murdered by a white man." And I said, "Really? Is that what you're going to do? Or are you going to just simply say a person killed another person?" Right? That's really what we're talking about. Everything else is sensationalism, right? The crime is the crime. It doesn't really matter. It's not a more serious crime because of you incorporated the ethnicities into the case, right? It is what it is. Like you may feel strongly one way or the other, but murder is just murder, right? It's not a more serious murder if it's a white person killing a black person. No, it's still murder. I'm sure that what I just said, other people could say in a much simpler way, you know, but I wanted to take the accusation of hate seriously, right? In spite of the subjectivity of hate and of love. So really, it all just boils down to justice. The more just a society is, the less crime and likelihood people will be talking about or entertaining the idea of a hate crime, right? And I hope that more and more people have this sort of clarity of thinking. After Trump gave his semi-State of the Union address, over 70% of America, or who were surveyed, had a favorable opinion of the speech. 80% of America, or something like some ridiculously high percentage, approves of DOGE, of Department of Government Efficiency, of what it's doing. And so it gives me hope that the overwhelming majority of people in America are rational, that they are not they're not ready to abandon their logic, their mind, and simply go on emotion, right? But that they are willing to think things through, right? So that's it for this episode. But again, crime is just crime. Once you insert emotional or emotion adjectives in front of it, then you're trying to basically say that it's the same crime except worse because there was emotion in it. But no, that's not the way that we should judge things. Emotion might have been a motivator, but the crime is just simply the crime. And so to try to insert hate crimes, as a different category, is just simply inviting a lot of trouble. And we saw, right, what happens next. Now you have hate speech, right? Is that a crime? Well, you have freedom of speech, but hey, that hate speech, I don't know. And now we have banning of speech, right? At first, I don't know if you remember, it used to be safe spaces. And then they just said, no, 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 you're just not allowed to say it, right? And so this slow, gradual escalation and taking away of our rights simply through the use and manipulation of emotions, that's got to stop. All right, that's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.